Davidson, welcome to the podcast. It is so wonderful to have you here.
I'm so excited to actually finally be here.
I fell in love with Sticky Fingers, and after I read that and reviewed it back in episode 248, I had to have you on the show to just talk about your books. And the timing is so good because you've just released To Die For, which is the second book in the Joker Sin series. Now, before we get into all of the stuff about the new book, tell us about this series.
Joker Sin is a nightclub in Haven Hart, actually. It's in the same universe as one of my other series, but it's completely standalone. And the books are characters that are within the nightclub that work there, like the owner, the bartender, the DJ, and the head of security. So there's going to be 4 books in the series, and it follows their 4 stories.
Very cool. What kind of inspired you to get into this series? What were the pieces that for you formed up Joker Sin?
Joker Sin actually became an inspiration when I was writing Havenheart, because the nightclub does play a part in one of the books. And when I wrote that place in there, I was just like, there's a story there. And it just wouldn't leave my head. So I just started jotting things down here and there, and suddenly I was just like, I'm gonna come back to this universe and I'm gonna write this story.
Oh, so Joker Sin is a spinoff.
It's a spinoff, yeah. But one thing I wanted to be really, really careful is I wanted to also make it if you never read Havenheart, it was totally fine. You could just read Joker Sin and you wouldn't be lost.
That's tremendous to just keep building out this universe that you're writing in. And after, 7 books of Havenheart, now you've extended it out a little bit more.
Yeah. I thought that was going to be the end, I thought it was going to be 7 books and then that was going to be it. And then I kind of knew Joker Sin was coming, but I couldn't say anything. So when it was ending, people were getting sad and I was like, you won't be sad, I promise.
What's it like to have such a big universe? Because there are several authors in our genre, of course, who have, start something and then it branches over here and it branches over here and then it connects over here. Mm-hmm. Did you anticipate doing that with your own writing at some point?
Well, I always knew that I was going to create a fictional universe and it's not because I don't like geography. It's just because when you are writing a real place, you have to be very, very careful. Especially if a person lives there, they will rip you apart if they're like, that's not there anymore. But my imagination has always created make-believe places. So I wanted to write a universe that had a coffee shop I'd want to go to and a restaurant I'd want to go to. But I also wanted to make a place that I don't necessarily think is on the up and up. It's very shisty, gives it that old town mafia feel to it. But everyone just kind of still stays there, and they don't know why they stay there. And they all constantly say, I don't know why I'm still here. But it's just that I love the whole place. And when I came back to it, when I was writing Joker Sin after leaving it for a little while, it just felt like home. So I'm happy to be back there.
That's very cool. Tell us about the new book, To Die For.
So To Die For, it's book 2, and it's a standalone within the series. So if you didn't read book 1, you're okay. And it's Max, the bartender's story, and it's a patron who goes there quite often. His name's Sparkles, but he has a real name. He's a dance teacher, and Sparkles has quite an ugly past that Max knows nothing about. He's just enamored by him because Sparkle has pink hair and he wears outlandish clothes, and he's just a lot of fun. And Sparkles wants nothing to do with him, and Max wants everything to do with him. And Max lives at home with his mom and his sisters, and he's Italian, and they're interfering. And Sparkles is kind of all alone with him and his dog. So the clash of the two is kind of crazy. And then when Sparkles' past kind of catches up with him, Max has to pretty much kind of save the day.
I love the name. I mean, just having somebody who just goes by Sparkles is just pretty awesome. Yeah.
Well, and it was funny, too, because Sparkles in book 3 in Havenheart, I don't know how many people caught it. if they read the Havenheart series. But in book 3, you met Sparkles for about 30 seconds. And he got the name Sparkles by one of the characters in Havenheart who happened to pass him by and saw he was all glittery, and he just called him Sparkles because he needed a favor. So when I went back to write the book and I realized Sparkles was still there in my head, I said, I have to keep that name because someone's going to pick up on it.
So as you were building Havenheart, and you mentioned it as this skeezy place, because this is a romantic suspense thriller sort of series, there's a lot that goes down in this town.
Yes. I'm shocked it hasn't been like bombed out of the world or something like that.
Tell us a little bit about that series as a whole, because it's 7 books long at this point. You mentioned it's complete. Yeah. Which is great for anybody who wants to go off and binge some romantic suspense. But what's it about Havenheart that makes it such a home for so much suspense to go on?
The best way I was able to describe it to myself, to convince myself that it's okay that I'm writing this, is that if none of the characters in there, or at least one of the characters that play off of each other, has some sort of a past. And the best place to hide for somebody who has a past is a place that everyone's trying to hide. So when the first book starts in that series, you have Snow, who's living on the streets, and then you have Christopher, who's a mob boss in Havenheart. So those 2 stories kind of went together, and then you had the people who worked for Christopher, and then you bring in assassins, and then all of a sudden you have mobsters and assassins and the men that love them. And you realize that the men that end up loving these horrible people are actually genuinely nice people. One of them's a professional hugger who falls in love with an assassin. Another one's a
professional hugger.
He's a professional hugger hired by the guy's sister because she thinks he's depressed. And then he realizes what's happening. And he's like, I murder people. And this guy wants to hug him. And, and it was just, I love, there's goodness there. And you see it within like Snow and Teddy and Quill, and then there's bad there, and you see that in Black and Christopher and Reardon and all them. And they just balance. It just balances the universe.
Had you always planned it to be 7?
Nope.
So
when I wrote the first book, I thought I wrote a book. There you go. I bucket list crossed off, and I never thought anything else was going to happen. Snowfalling was pretty successful, so I said, all right, I'll do it again. And it was when actually I wrote book 2 that I realized that this is going to be an ongoing series. So book 1 was kind of written, and then book 2 kind of really starts it off. And
so 1's almost a prequel in some ways, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Like, you could read that and, like, literally never read the rest of the series. You wouldn't feel like you lost something. But I know that once you start the series, if you want to get all the answers, you have to go to the last book.
That's good. I love series that kind of click you over, not necessarily with cliffhangers, but that overarching arc.
Yeah, I had to have, like, a finality to each one. It's like kind of like Stranger Things, where the series would end, but you still had questions, and you'd have to wait till the next season to get some answers.
Yes, exactly. Because that thing is lurking over there somewhere.
Yeah. We forget about that.
Did you enjoy building the world out as you kept going? And did you run into any particular plot points that needed more research than others?
Because the world is so not believable at all. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't think there's a place in this entire world that is like Havenheart. And there were sometimes a point, and one of my betas picked up on it once, and they were just like, how many things can you possibly have on Fifth Avenue? And I'm like, is there a lot of things? She's like, yeah, you really have to give another road. And I'm like, okay. So, like, that would be, like, a thing. And I'm just like, I didn't even think about that. I would just, like, Fifth Avenue, why not? Fifth Avenue is really big in New York. So, I mean, that was kind of a thing. Because even though I created it, I had to realize how much I was putting in a certain area.
I love that. It's like, it's more than Main Street. It's everything street.
Yeah. I'm like, no, it's just a big circle of Fifth Avenue. It's just...
Do you have a particular favorite story that you told in that universe? I know that's a little bit like picking your own child, but I think every author has one book in a series that's like, that one's kind of the pinnacle right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always cheesy to say that it was my first one, but, the first one was, I think, was always your first book is always something special. Any author
Mm-hmm.
will tell you, like, that first one is, your baby. But I actually had the most fun writing the last one because I brought every single character from the series back for that final book. And well, it was tricky, very hard, and there was a book Bible. It was so much fun to have them all interacting for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So I would definitely say that Havenheart, which is the 7th book, was my favorite to write.
And I would guess that you must have Haven Hart people making cameos in Joker Sin since it's the local bar.
So that's funny because I had to be careful because I said it was like it's a standalone, but I do have Easter eggs thrown into it for those who did read it. So, there's a character, somebody has art on their wall and it's from one of the characters of Havenheart. So somebody picked up on it. And then you have in the next book, you have someone renting from another one of the characters that were in Havenheart. So, I mean, there is that. I haven't actually physically put anyone in, and I'm still trying to figure out how to do it without confusing people who haven't read it.
Well, you've got 2 more books to go.
Yep. 2 more.
To put that in. But at least the Easter eggs are there, and those are always fun to come across.
Yeah, and it's been fun to hear people go, oh my gosh, you put this in. And I'm like, oh, I'm so glad you saw that.
What are the plans for the next 2 books? What can you kind of tease us with?
Book 3 is the DJ Ledger's story and Shane's story. That's not a secret. People picked up on that. And then the last book is the head of security. And I was totally making his book last because he's by far the most mysterious. And the 3rd book, it's a stalker story. And in the 4th book, the last one, is a serial killer story. And there's been mention of a restaurant called Vane's, and you actually know Vane's from Havenheart, and you know Vane's from Joker Sin. And in this one, you actually have the owner of Vane's in the 4th book. And that's who's paired up with the security guy. Try to make each one different, but, violent, because apparently that's what it is there.
Apparently, yes. Why do people live there? I don't know.
I don't know either. I'm like, why are you people here?
Do we get to go back to Havenheart later for something else?
It's funny because my husband, he's my soundboard, and I'm always just like, what do I do next? Because I love going here. And he was just like, well, I mean, you can either have someone that's from there and give them another story. And he's like, or you can have somebody else who just, that's their home base, but they go around. So I do have a series coming, but I don't think it's going to happen till the end of next year. And it's a Hitman. And kind of like, I don't know if anyone ever saw The Accountant, where he's kind of like a loner in a sense. And he has his handler. So it's kind of like him and his handler, and his base is going to be in Havenheart. So that's how I'm going to work that back in again.
So you don't always write these intense romantic suspense books, because Sticky Fingers was more, I would call it maybe romantic suspense light in terms of the way that it ultimately panned out, but it's more a contemporary billionaire trope romance it's also an age gap.
Yeah.
Where did this come from after all this that you've written that is so kind of, on the heavier romantic suspense side in this terrible town?
I know, it was kind of weird to not write there. And I had to very much keep it apart because I had to remember it wasn't in the same universe. So because of that, I did need to make it later, or else I think someone might have called a therapist for me. But Sticky Fingers came to be because I went to the beach one day with my mom about 3 years ago. And it was this little private beach area that kind of reminded me of Cabot Cove from Murder, She Wrote. But everyone was rich, and except for me and my mom. And we were sitting outside of a cafe, and I was looking around, and there was just mansions in the distance and stuff like that. And there's people walking by, and I got this whole thing came. I was like, somebody who stayed here for a summer could totally pickpocket all these people and probably be rich by the end of the summer. And from that kind of Sticky Fingers just kind of came to be. And I was just like, what if somebody did get a job for the summer and got rich off of that? But I needed to obviously make it a little bit more. I needed to give Kyle a good reason why he would do something like that, because he's not a bad guy. So
his friend certainly is, though.
friend is not a nice person, no. But I knew it wasn't going to be a, murdery kind of a book because it just didn't feel like it was. And it was a little weird to not write murder in it, to be honest with you. And I did actually get a review once that I read that somebody said that it was so different from my Havenheart books that they weren't even 100% sure that I even wrote it. And I was like, oh, I don't know if that's good or not. But yeah, I mean, I think that an author, can be versatile, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I mean,
you still had a suspense element in it, though.
Yeah. I mean, a little bit, I think so, yeah. But it was, I think, more, you actually said it like really, really well in your review. It was very like Dynasty-esque. Like it was very like a soap opera-ish in a sense. And it was funny you said that because when I was writing it and I was just like, this would never happen. I mean, maybe Joan Collins would make this happen. But like,
Alexis would totally do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was kind of funny that you said that. So, and these things don't happen. My books, these things don't, I mean, maybe they do. I don't know these people, but no one I know that this happens to. So it's not believable. Like these people, I don't know them.
And I liked how you kind of play with that billionaire trope a lot and keep the power dynamics between the two characters really kind of balanced out in how they, what they bring to the table to essentially help and fix each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm more of a emotional author than I am like if you're looking to read a book for sex, you're not going to find that in my books. I mean, it's there. It's just not my main thing. I'm about connection and the emotions. And while I would love to, write a billionaire who is a jerk and just like, forces Kyle to do horrible things and stuff, it just wasn't their story. And I wanted people I didn't want them to look at Maddox and think, oh, he's just another typical billionaire, blah, blah, blah. I wanted them to know that just because somebody has money doesn't necessarily make them a jerk. And, and someone who doesn't have money who's stealing doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad person. It was just kind of like showing, you could be the same and, your bank account really shouldn't matter. And that was just really what I was trying to push with that book.
Yeah. And with Maddox, too, I was more into his story of essentially coming into his own in the business and to himself than the fact that he had, all this money that he could throw around if he wanted to.
We should all have that problem.
Right. This looks like a standalone book at the moment. Do you think we'll revisit what you've set up here at some point?
No, I have gotten a few requests for Evan, his brother, but nothing is talking to me right now, probably because I have like 800 other things talking to me right now. But I will, never say never. I never say never. I never thought I'd come back to Havenheart when I started writing it, so who knew? So
coming back to the brothers is interesting. I was thinking coming back to the resort, but coming back to the brothers is interesting too.
The resort's an idea too. See, look at you not helping.
I give that to you if you want. More interesting people at the resort. Now, the core of your books, as we talked about a little bit, is really kind of murdery and a little dark.
Yeah.
What intrigues you about working inside that realm?
My mom asked me that once. She's like, what's wrong with you? I raised you to be a good girl, didn't I? Because she reads all my books, and she's like, I don't know what's wrong with you. And then she, of course, tries to make parallels. Is this supposed to be your father? And I'm like, no. I think it's just like, I've always been fascinated with, I love the History Channel, and I literally watch like all the crime dramas and, the mafia, things like that. And while I don't ever want to be in the mafia, and while I never want to be, have the attention of an assassin, I'm intrigued by that life. And I always find it, like I like watching about serial killers, but I don't ever want to be their victim. And I just find the whole mindset of it to be so much more interesting than my life. So I just kind of wanted to, see what I could do with it and almost like humanize them. And I have fun with the anti-hero. I have fun showing, the not so bad guy and the person that I think we all sometimes want to be the vigilante in so many cases, and they can. So it just kind of is like a therapy. So I kind of enjoy it.
And everybody needs their little bit of therapy.
Yeah, you know, and if it means murdering bad people and I feel good about myself afterward, then good.
You mentioned that the first Havenheart book was really kind of, okay, it's on your bucket list. Okay, I've written a book. How did writing a book get onto your bucket list? What kind of propelled you to pick up pen and go for it?
It was more of a challenge when I was, and if anyone even just opened up the Snow Falling book and looked at the dedication, it makes sense. When I was in junior high school, I told my guidance counselor that I wanted to be a writer. And she told me that I didn't have I wasn't, for lack of a better word, smart enough to be a writer. She said that I lacked the discipline.
Oh, that is
and that
terrible.
I just wasn't, yeah, she's like, she's like, you're just not there. And she's just like, I would stick to something that's more you. And of course, she never told me that, and her guidance was terrible. And so I never really wrote. I just read all of these books for years and years and years. And I never told anybody. And on the side, I was just kind of dabbling with it. And one day I mentioned it to a friend, and she's like, I'd like to read it. And I was like, no, oh my God, it's never going anywhere. And so I sent it to her, and she's also an author. So she's just like, I love this. And she's like, you have to publish it. And her and a group of my friends got together. They got a cover for me, a formatter. They just kind of, basically without them, they kind of invested in that book for me. So when the book was published, I dedicated it to my guidance counselor.
I hope you sent it to her too.
It's funny. I don't know where she is now. She might even be dead, to be honest with you. She was kind of old, but I dedicated it to her because it's just kind of a reminder to me every time I open that book that just because someone says you can't doesn't mean you can't. So I just kind of did it to show that I could do it. I never knew anything more would come of it, though.
Love that story. Not the guidance counselor part, but that you just persevered and just, did it.
Yeah, but I mean, like, there's so many people, like, I have kids, so, I'm always listening to what their teachers and stuff are telling them, and, I could just be like, sometimes I'll be like, that's the worst advice I've ever heard. Like,
how did you come to write romance as your first book?
I used to write fan fiction, and it's funny because N.R. Walker and I were talking about this the other day. We wrote fan fiction at the same time in the same universe. And
what was your universe of choice?
It was the Twyfic universe. And we had no idea who we were until I told her my name and she told me hers, and I was like, oh my God. And we read each other's stuff, and we had no idea. And then my friend, who's also reviews on my blog, actually, she told me to read a book called The Coil by L.A. Gilbert because it had an autistic boy in it, and my son's autistic. And I was just like, oh, okay. And it was the first book I ever read. And the second I read it, I was just like, oh my gosh. I'm like, this was really, really refreshing and good. And she kind of was just like, well, then read all these. And then I just kind of I never looked back.
That's awesome. And you mentioned the blog, which is Diverse Reader.
Yeah.
What pivoted you into reviewing and blogging?
So I was reading these books, and I realized that, and I was always talking to my friend Erin about it and stuff. And she's like, you should just open up some sort of space for yourself so you can get all these thoughts out because you have so many. So I did, and I started this little thing that was nothing. And she just kind of would review with me, and we just started throwing it up there. And Edmund Manning was actually the first author I ever had on my blog. Because I said to him, I was like, can I ask you some questions? I'm curious and stuff like that. And he was like, do you want to put it on your blog? I'm like, oh, do you think people would want to read that? And he's like, yeah, let's do it. Because that's just who he is. I was like, okay. And then just kind of took off after that, and then just grew and grew and grew. And now, I'm just like, well, now it's a thing. So,
and it's been around for quite a while now. I think you're one of the few blogs that's been around for quite a while at this point.
Yeah, it's going into its 7th year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome. The longevity is great to see, because the bloggers are an important part of what makes our community and our universe go. And we've lost a few over the years. So it's good that there are some long timers still in there.
Yeah, every time one goes, my heart kind of like feels like it like breaks a little bit. I'm just like, don't go anywhere, come back.
What are some of your favorite reads from the past few months?
I've had a lot of trouble getting into books lately. My mind is all over the place. Mm-hmm. But the last couple that I read that were really, really good is I read Pretty Sweet by Riley Hart and Christina Lee. And it kind of took me right out of my funk, which was really kind of nice because it was a light, happy story, a little heartbreaking at times, but it was a really good story. And I just love that. They have a book one, Pretty Perfect, which is also really, really good. Thorn in His Side by Helen Julia. I read that too. That was really good. It was a very Beauty and the Beast-ish kind of a story, and that was really good. Those two, probably in the last few months, have been the only two that I can think of that are standing out for me. But
it's when you have that book that goes like that book right there, that's what pops.
Yeah, and it's sad because I'll start a book and then my mind is just, I don't know what's going on, but I know what's going on.
The world.
And I'm just like, come on, I was really enjoying that. Gosh darn it, and it's frustrating and I feel bad, but I always go back to them later.
Yeah, we'll get back to where everybody can focus and read again, hopefully.
That'd be nice.
So we mentioned the 2 books yet to come in the Joker Sin series. Anything else on the horizon you can kind of tease us with?
So much. I have too much. Simon's book from Haven Hart is actually a standalone book, and that is coming out at the beginning of next year. And I get harassed about that one a lot. And I've been putting that one off because I really want to get the Joker Sin books out. And then I actually have a vampire book coming. I'm so excited because I've never written a vampire book. But obviously, I did the fan fiction, but this book won't leave me alone. I've been thinking about it for a year, and I've been talking to a few people about it, and everyone's like, do it. And I'm like, all right. So we're going to give it a shot and hope that works really well.
Can't wait for that. I love a good vampire story sometimes, and I don't read enough of them.
I think I went through that whole thing where I read a lot of them like everyone did, and then I got tired of them, and then I went to something else, and now it seems to be coming back again, and I'm finding myself reading them more, and I'm like, I think I'm going to write one.
It's a good diversion from the world that we live in,
yes,
to be in that kind of place.
Yeah.
So how can everyone keep up with you online?
I have a website, which is davidsonking.com. I also have a readers group where I'm there a lot, and that's King's Court on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter. I'm pretty much everywhere. I just started joining everything. I'm even on MeWe no one goes.
I don't even know what that is.
I know, right? Sometimes I forget I'm on there. But if you go to my website or my readers group, those are the 2 places that I'm for authoring is where I'm mostly at.
Fantastic. And of course, we'll link to Diverse Reader also so that folks can check in with what your reviewers are doing.
Yep. You could always get me there too. There's a contact thing there. So
cool. Well, Davidson, thank you so much for coming to talk to us about the worlds that you've created. It's been wonderful talking to you.
It's been wonderful being here.